up. This is titled Using Your Freedom of the Press, and I'm not going to share how to create content. I'm just going to share with you how to distribute the content that you are creating. And there are several different ways in which to create, just to go over real quick. And a couple of you have already picked up. I've got basically a written form of the presentation. If you would like one, pick it up. I do ask that you make a donation. There's a Bitcoin QR code, a Litecoin QR code, and a Dogecoin QR code. Use the crypto of your choice, or if you just want to give me some silver, then I'll take that as well. But there's 10 copies. I think 3 have been picked up, so still 7 more copies. And at some point, this is actually going to be available for free on liberty.me as one of their Liberty guides. So if you're on liberty.me, then you'll be able to download this at some point. But some of the various ways that you can distribute content, most people, automatically think online, obviously, and that's, basically becoming much more popular than the print forms. But there's also newspapers, books, radio, podcasting, which I'll cover sort of as the same sort of thing. And then there's vodcasting and television. Vodcasting, of course, being a video podcast. And with cable television, I know there's a lot of activists here in New Hampshire that take advantage of, and I don't really like the term take advantage of, but they use what is available to them. And they use the community access television. And I cover this a little bit in here. So let's start off with online publications. Or rather, online print publication, because I'll cover the podcasting and vodcasting later. The most important thing before I start getting into ways to publish, the most important thing is if you are publishing content, be consistent. And there's a twofold reason for being consistent. One, it helps you get into a pattern of, okay, it's Monday, I need to do this. Or it's Tuesday, whatever day you pick, or if it's a daily thing, try to be consistent in the time of day that you put it out. There are some people that will do stuff weekly, some people do it monthly. I have a variety of projects, one that I do every day, and I try to get done before 9 o'clock in the morning. That's my daily newscast. I've been waking up early, going up into the LRN media room, getting that produced, and then come down and do whatever it is that I'm doing throughout the day. So I get that done every day. Try to have it done before 9 o'clock. There's a couple days where it's 9:15 before it gets done, but remain consistent because it helps you get into a schedule. The second reason that you want to remain consistent is that it helps your audience know when you are going to produce content. If you're doing, like a series on the history of Lysander Spooner's American Letter Mail Company, and you tell your audience, I'm doing this weekly, and I'm putting it out on Monday, and then one Monday rolls around and there's nothing, they might look on Tuesday, well, maybe something happened and he didn't get it up today. And then they'll look the next day. And if it's not up the next day, you're losing some of your audience. So if you say that it's going to be a certain day of the week or a certain time of the month or a certain time of day, and it's not there, you are going to lose some audience. So it not only helps you, it helps keep your audience. So how many people here have a blog? How many people here have more than one blog on more than one platform? So the most popular platform I think everybody would know is WordPress. Then there's Blogger, which I think is sort of starting to lose a lot of the luster that it once had, because WordPress is a lot easier to use than Blogger. You have a lot more options. Tumblr is actually becoming fairly popular. I still don't understand Tumblr. Tumblr just doesn't make sense to me because you can't really, format it and create it to how you want it. You can't personalize it as much in my experience, and it seems to just put everything on one page. So you keep scrolling down and you see more posts, more posts. But some people love Tumblr. And there are services that you can use, one of them being If This Then That, where if you post something on your blog, you can input an RSS feed and then it will automatically repost to Tumblr. I use this not to repost to Tumblr, but to share posts on Facebook and other social network outlets. So everything that I post, or pretty much everything that I post on Free Press Publications, which is fpp.cc, gets automatically shared onto Facebook and Twitter. Some people use Google Plus. I don't like Google Plus. It's just a personal preference. But you can get it set up to where it will automatically share on every social network site that you have. And one other outlet, and this is a newer one, and it uses WordPress for the publishing end, and that you heard me mention earlier, liberty.me. And I include this as a favor to Jeffrey Tucker, who I had pitched the idea to him of, hey, I want to put up a guide on how to use your freedom of the press. And he said, do me a favor and just include liberty.me in there. And Jeffrey's actually going to wind up being here at PorcFest sometime later this week. But that's another outlet. And of course, it's a subscription based thing for a lot of the social networking aspects of it, but the publishing sites are still available to anyone, even if they don't have a subscription. So I use it as a secondary outlet for my content, where I post everything primarily on my site and then secondarily on liberty.me and a couple of other websites. Basically, because I just want the content out there. I don't necessarily care about my website's got 180,000 hits yesterday because I said X. I'm not saying the super controversial things. I'm getting the ideas of liberty out there. And, whatever it is that you're using your website for, remain consistent and also take advantage of tools that allow you to share on social networks. Another way to publish online, and I recommend it as a complement to a blog or a website, and that is using a mailing list. Because a mailing list is targeted to specific people. And of course, those people could share the email, click like share and then hit all of their contacts. But there's no guarantee of that happening. There's also no easy way of tracking how many people see the email after you have sent it. So there are services like MailChimp, and I use them, to where they'll let you see how many people you sent the email to opened it. But there's no way of tracking how many people those people sent the email to. So, and Lynn, I would highly recommend this for you for the Free Ross campaign, to set this up with supporters as well as media, so that you can send out press releases about Ross's trial or whatever it is that you want. And that's how I have mine set up, is I have a list of media as well as people who have said, I want to get your email. So I use it to complement what I'm already doing online. The next form of print that we will get into are physical books. And I have a lot of physical books available for sale up in RV site. It's either 24 or 25. I forget which one. But just go up there. It's right next to Terran Lupo. And there are a lot of easy ways now that you can publish books. There are some print-on-demand services that make it very easy. CreateSpace is the distributor that I use, and they are owned by Amazon. So I have this weird love-hate relationship with Amazon because Amazon, they're just so big, and they've been lobbying for the internet sales tax to be national under nationwide thing. So I'm not a fan of that part, but I do so much business through them that I like it that they're making it easier for people to publish. And real quick, let's go over some of the pros and cons of publishing yourself as opposed to using traditional publishing such as Simon and Schuster, Penguin Books, or any of the other hundreds of publishers, but those are two of the more well-known. And of course, after I'm done, I will open it up to the floor for questions. But one of the key benefits that I see as a content creator of publishing myself is that I get to decide what sort of license my content is published under. Now, I'm not sure how many people in here support intellectual property rights, how many people are opposed to it, so I'm not going to get into a debate about whether or not one can own ideas. But if you pick up a copy of the booklet, you will see that I am using what is called an anti-copyright, saying that I don't believe that people can own ideas, that copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. Whereas if I were to go to a traditional publishing company, then they would say, okay, when you sign here, you're giving us the copyright, which means that I would no longer own what I created and what I gave them. They would then control it in perpetuity. Even, like after I'm dead and then for 70 years, they would control the copyright. Whereas what I would love to have happen is the day that I die, everything that I've ever created goes into the public domain and anybody can use it how they see fit. If I go through a traditional publisher, that's not possible. Also, the traditional publishers retain the publishing rights. So not only do they have the copyright, but they also then control how it gets published. So let's take, for example, Davi Barker, who I have published a couple of his books now. If Davi decides, Daryl, I really like you as a person, but you're not doing, as much as I think you could or should in promoting my book, I want to take it somewhere else. He could do that because of the way that we've written our contract. But if you publish yourself, then you don't have to worry about a contract unless you decide to write up a contract with yourself, but that just seems overly onerous and a waste of paper. But you completely control when, where, and how your book is published. You also have more control over your marketing because you are your own marketing. With a major publisher, a lot of times they will tell you, we handle all of the marketing, but because they are publishing so many authors, they're not doing great marketing for all of the authors that get published. They're doing really great marketing for a handful of the authors. They're doing great marketing for the books that they know are going to make them millions of dollars. And they use that to basically, pay essentially rent to the bookstores to put the books on the shelf. And that's one of the cons of self-publishing, is that you're not getting bookshelf space on the stores of Barnes & Noble. I would say Borders, but they went away. You're also not necessarily going to get shelf space at Books A Million. You could possibly get it done at a local bookstore if you go in and are able to talk to the owner of the place. So it is possible to get shelf space in some bookstores, but it's going to be your own doing of going in and asking. Whereas the major companies, they have these deals worked out to where they will sell, buy as many books as you want. And if they don't sell, we buy them back. And, any one of you could do that with your local bookstore, but you're not going to have the money necessarily, unless you're one of these Bitcoin rich people, to get a deal with Books A Million or Barnes and Noble to have a dozen books on the shelves in all of their 1,000 stores across the country, and then be able to guarantee to buy those books back if they don't sell. You also get to control your royalties because you're setting the price of the book. So it requires a little bit of math skills to, this is what it cost me, this is that. If I sell it for X, then I make Y. So you control that. If you go through a traditional publisher, they're just going to tell you this is what the book cost. We'll give you 40 cents a copy. And that's actually what they give. That's in the range of what they give authors, is between like 40 cents and 70 cents. But most of the time, if you're signing a deal with a big publisher, they will give you a forward. So they give you money for, yeah, we published your book, here's some money, but from henceforth, you're getting 40 cents a copy. The authors that I publish, I generally give $1 a copy. And, it's, unless you write something that winds up going viral, then for the most part, you are not going to get rich publishing books. Even the people like Tom Woods, he's making a living, but he is not getting rich on his books by no stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure Tom will tell you that if you ask him. And I've heard him say it in a speech, plus I know how the publishing industry works. I've done math on books, and it's very hard to sell thousands of copies of a book. The average book sells less than 100 copies. I've heard figures between 15 and 75, but it's one of those things to where nobody really knows how many are sold, because a lot of times publishers are the ones that are self-reporting statistics, and not all publishers report the statistics. But we know that there are millions of books sold every year. We can calculate based on what bookstores say that they have sold. So we know that the average book sells less than 100 copies. But I'm in no way trying to dissuade you. If you have a book inside of you, write it, because the worst thing that could happen is that somebody buys it and likes it. Next, and this is related to the publishing, the International Standard Book Number. It's something that every book that is hardbound must have in order for Amazon to get listed on their site. It's something that all books really need in order to be searchable by major bookstores, or minor bookstores for that part, because they all have the computer system now to where they can just type in this book number, and most people probably don't even pay attention to it, but it's basically the same thing as the QR number on the back, or the barcode number on the back. They can type that in and then look to see where it's available, how much. So all books have to have one of those. There are a couple of different ways that you could get them. If you use a print-on-demand service, then they will offer you a ISBN number. But they might not offer you the option to put what they call an imprint name, meaning the name of whatever you want to call your publishing company. Or it doesn't even have to be a company, but if you want the book to say, published by freeross.org, then you would need to supply your own ISBN. A single ISBN, because there's only one company that you can purchase an ISBN from in the United States under some international treaty without getting into trouble. The only company that you can buy that from is Bowker. And they will sell a single ISBN for $125. They will sell you 10 for $250, or 100 for $600, or if you buy 1,000, then it basically goes down to $1 per ISBN. If you buy over that, then they drop the price even more. So it's another way in which they're kind of trying to outprice people from self-publishing by making it so expensive to buy a single ISBN. to where most people aren't going to spend $125 for a number just to be able to publish a book that they're probably not going to make money on. So let's go to ebooks because it's a lot simpler to publish an ebook. You will still need an ISBN, but you don't need physical stock to carry around with you to try to sell. But what I use for both the physical books and the ebooks, as far as creating the templates, I use LibreOffice, and it allows you to export in a lot of different formats. So if you don't have it, it's a free download. It used to be called OpenOffice, but now it's called LibreOffice. So I recommend using that. And I also, again, with the Amazon thing, I use Amazon for the ebooks because they give you some benefits if you go through them and only them for distribution of the ebooks. They allow you to run specials where you can reduce the price gradually over a period of time and then it gradually goes back up, or they allow you to just give away free copies. So you can say on this day, this book is free for 24 hours. And if enough people download the book for free, then it will go really high in the rankings. And then once it goes off of being free, it's still going to remain high in the rankings. And then people see, oh, wow, this is number 3 in this category. I'm going to buy a copy. So basically, you gamble on I'm going to give away a lot of free things in hopes that I sell some things. There are other outlets that you can use. Lulu and Smashwords are two of the others. Lulu is slightly better than Smashwords. Smashwords is absolutely horrible, especially if you have footnotes, because they do not allow you to have footnotes in the file that you send them. You would have to completely reformat the book and put all of the footnotes as endnotes, and that is kind of a pain to get done. Whereas Amazon and Lulu, they allow footnotes, and they somehow are able to work around that. And as I have already mentioned, millions of books are published every year, and it's sometimes difficult to get people to find and become interested in your book. So one thing that I would suggest is to enter your book, if you do publish a book, to enter it into as many book award competitions as you can afford. Some of these come with $1,000 grand prizes, some $2,000. Others don't give a cash prize, but they do give recognition and notoriety. And if you are only named a finalist in one of the categories, they still will send you a graphic that you can then put on the book cover saying, this book was a finalist in this. And that helps. If you enter an awards competition and are only named a finalist and you get the little graphic, I highly suggest that you redo your book cover to put that graphic, because anytime somebody walks down the book aisle and they see something with a graphic saying, I won an award, or I was an honorable mention in an awards competition, that's going to catch their eye, and it automatically gives credibility to that book. And then there's also audiobooks, and I recently recorded my first audiobook. It was for Davi Barker's Authoritarian Sociopathy, which I published, and I have sent the files to Davi. I'm waiting on his approval of the files before I submit them to get included on audible.com. And the company Audio Creation Exchange, or ACX, they are basically the go-to audio book distribution company, to where they get you on Audible, Amazon, iTunes, and others. And again, if you're exclusive to them, they give you benefits. If you decide that you want to put your audiobook up on Podomatic or one of the other podcasting services, then put it out for free, because otherwise you don't get the benefits from ACX if you wind up going through them to monetize your audiobook. And let's finish up on print publication before I go into podcasting, because podcasting and radio are going to be the way that I tell you to do it. It's going to be very similar to the audiobook, although if you do go through ACX, they do have requirements of you have to be between this bit rate and this bit rate, and it has they've got some technical aspects that you have to meet. But I'm not going to go over technicals when I go through podcasting. But newspapers, if you guys stop by my booth, you can grab copies of the newspaper that I publish. I've been publishing for about a year and a half, almost 2 years now, I believe. And right now, I recently had to cut down my distribution from 2,000 copies to 1,000 because I lost a couple of distributors. But I just go to the local newspaper and use their print shop. So if anybody knows where I live, Darren, I'm fairly certain you might find the irony in this, that the Keene Sentinel is printing a Liberty newspaper once a month. And, of course, they're making money on it. But, the Keene Sentinel, for anybody that doesn't know, is not friendly necessarily towards the Liberty activists in the state. So I just find it ironic that they are printing some Liberty propaganda, if you will, but they don't really care what the content is because they're getting paid for it. And the paper that I do, I put the PDF file online so that anybody anywhere in the country can download that. And I put it up in the hopes that somebody will take it to their local print shop and get printed up. There are ads in there, so if you want to monetize it yourself, you can replace my ads with yours. And I would request that that's the only modifications that you make. Just because, I'm going through the effort of putting the articles. If you want to use my articles in something that you create, feel free. But if you're going to print the paper with my title on it, I would request that no other modifications other than advertisers be changed. So now let's go to radio and podcasting. And I'm sure if you guys have been here for more than, 7 hours, you have heard some of the radio being broadcast from the LRN Media Room. One of those shows, two of those shows are actually being broadcast on actual radio stations across the country. The Freedom Fiends from 1 to 3 in the morning is on about half a dozen stations, maybe a dozen radio stations now. And Free Talk Live is on 150 stations across the country. Actually, beyond across the country, because they're on a station in Guam. And actually in the Virgin Islands as well. So beyond coast to coast. And, it's a little difficult to actually get into the radio business. But Michael Dean made it happen with the Freedom Fiends. And I am fairly certain that had it not been for the success of Free Talk Live, that Michael Dean never would have tried going to GCN with his show and getting it then syndicated on radio stations. But if you're going to do that, just know it's going to be a lot of work to get radio stations to pick up the show. Since October of last year, I've been doing affiliate relations for Free Talk Live, which means that every morning from 9 a.m. until 1 in the afternoon, I am calling radio stations, trying to get the program directors on the phone, trying to get them to listen to the show, and then trying to get them on the phone again so that I can find out what they thought of the show, and then find out if they have any openings in their schedule. If they do have openings, is it during a time that Free Talk Live could fill? And, whatever the show is that you're going to do. And, of course, for Michael Dean, being on from 1 to 3 in the morning, there's a better chance that some program director is going to say, oh, yeah, I'm just running, some replay overnight. I would love to have live content. Whereas 7 to 10 p.m., there's a lot of things, they call them cram downs, to where if you take Sean Hannity, you must take this other blowhard. And if you take this guy, then you have to take his best of weekend show where we're just going to replay the Monday segment from the first hour, the Tuesday segment from the second hour, and the Wednesday segment from the third hour. But you have to play that on Saturdays, and then on Sundays, we've got something else for you, but it's a best of, and you have to take it because that's what we say. And that's how the major radio companies work. I run into this all the time from program directors from Cumulus and Clear Channel saying, I'd love to take the show, but corporate says we have to take X. And you're not X, so we can't take you. But podcasting, there are no barriers. How many people, and Darren, I know you have one, how many people have at least one podcast? Okay, wow. This is the first time that I've been around Liberty people where like half of them didn't have a podcast, that either they produced themselves or they were like, oh yeah, I'm on my buddy's podcast. Because it seems that most Liberty people do wind up having a podcast. Because it is so easy to do. You get a good microphone, or actually I've heard podcasts to where people didn't even have a good microphone. But you get a microphone, you get something to record yourself, you talk into the microphone, you make sure that you hit the record button, because if you don't hit record, then you're not really good at podcasting. But hit the record button, you talk into the microphone, you hit stop. Some people don't edit their podcast at all. If you want the podcast to be good, then I would recommend editing. But it all depends on what you're doing. If you're doing one of these 3-hour-long podcasts, don't waste your time going through and editing out all of the what. Don't edit all of those out, because that's just going to take forever. But if you have a short podcast that's less than 20 minutes long, go through and touch it up, because it's going to help you realize how many times you goof up during your recording. And secondly, it cleans it up for the audience to where they have a more smooth listening, what's the word? Experience. They've got a more smooth listening experience by not having to listen to all of your deep breaths of air that you probably don't even realize that you're doing. And I never realized that I was doing until I started doing a 5-minute newscast. And looking through, it's like, oh, what's this little gap here? And then I click on it, and it's me going, you don't realize you're doing that, but you do. So if you have the time, touch it up. And also, if you're doing a show and you are what would be considered radio friendly, meaning that there are no F-bombs, the S word isn't being said, the C word, basically listen to George Carlin's 7 words to never say. If you've said any of those, or anything that you think might be as offensive as one of those, then you cannot get on iHeartRadio. But if you have a radio-friendly show, then I would recommend putting your archives on Spreaker, which has a connection to iHeartRadio. You hit a button that says Submit to iHeartRadio after you have 5 episodes up. iHeartRadio will then take some time, generally less than 2 weeks, to go through, listen to a few of the shows, make sure that it meets their minimum standards of decency as well as audio quality, and then the show will be accepted onto iHeartRadio. Right now, there's, I think, 4 or 5 Liberty shows that are on iHeartRadio. Free Talk Live, the Angel Clark Show, Peace News Now, as well as my long-form show that I do on Sundays, Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, and the daily newscast that I've been doing for 145 days now, FPP Radio News. So you can get all of those on iHeartRadio. Millions of people have that app downloaded on their phones. So people will listen. They might just scan through and type in talk radio. And if talk radio is one of your tags, then it will come up and people might stumble across your Liberty podcast on iHeartRadio. No guarantees that that's going to happen, but it's the possibility. And by being submitted to and approved to iHeartRadio, you have more of a chance of that happening than not submitting to iHeartRadio. Because if you're not submitted, you have a 0 chance of somebody accidentally stumbling across your show on iHeartRadio. And if you get a copy of the printed thing, I have the requirements that iHeartRadio says that you need to meet. So if you don't have a copy and you want one, come up, grab one. I do ask that you make a donation to the Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Dogecoin wallet. You can choose whichever one of those you wish to use. And I already mentioned Spreaker. SoundCloud is another one that is more popular than Spreaker, but it does not give you the option to connect to iHeartRadio. I submit my, or not submit, but I post my archives to both outlets because both outlets are very beneficial. As I said, SoundCloud is a lot more popular than Spreaker, so more people listen to the podcast on or the archives on SoundCloud. But with Spreaker, I get connected to iHeartRadio, and then I get people that listen to the Spreaker that don't use SoundCloud and vice versa. So in all, they complement one another more than compete with, is the way that I see it. And now let's move from the audio only to the audio and video. And how many people use YouTube? Okay, so this is a YouTube-heavy audience, more so than the podcast. And one thing that I would recommend, if you have a YouTube show that you do, or not even a show, but if you just do YouTube videos once a month, then as long as it's at a somewhat consistent length of time, then I would recommend looking into submitting it to your local cable access television station. Activists in Manchester are doing this. Activists in Keene are doing this. I think there are now like 3 Liberty shows on Cheshire TV in Keene, New Hampshire. A lot of the city councilors recently dropped their shows because of a decision made by Cheshire TV to charge people that did not have their own production team. And the city councilors never had their own production team, and they don't want to pay for production services, so they quit doing their shows. The Liberty activists all produce and record their shows off-site and then submit the content. So I think there's more Liberty programming now than there is government officials creating programming, unless you count the city council meetings that get broadcast. But that's just a nice little aside. And again, there are technical specifics if you do want to use community access television. You can't have any direct advertising. So if you've ever watched PBS, you would always notice the way they would do their commercials at the end. You know, Sesame Street was brought to you, not by the letter R, but, you know, brought to you by a grant from, and then they would name people that gave them money. But notice they never said, go buy their product. They never made what they call a call to action. So if you do submit to community access television, you can't have any of those calls to action. You can say this show is brought to you by, and then name a sponsor. You can put the logo of the company on there. So I could say, you know, this is brought to you by Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, and a logo with the website. But I cannot tell you, call Roberts and Roberts for advice on your investing. That would be a call to action. But that is just one of the things that you would, you know, have to wind up sacrificing to get on cable access television. But it's a way that you can still monetize by selling sponsorships and putting up the names of people that give you money. They also do have some other sorts of things, and one of these was actually created because of Andy Kaufman. The no rolling, tearing, or jumping of the screen. Andy Kaufman back in the 70s had something that was broadcast on, I believe it was NBC, and he put in there like 10 seconds of where the screen was just rolling. I'm sure people that are older will probably remember back when they were children, every now and then the screen would roll when you would lose signal. You can't do that. You can't do anything that would make a normal person think that there's a problem with the television signal. Because then people will start getting on their phones and calling the cable company, or in the case of Cheshire TV, they will call the guy that runs the cable access television station at home at 10 o'clock at night and tell him there's problems with my television. And Lynn, I see you're laughing. He has actually shared several experiences of where people have called him at home after 10 o'clock. I have no sound. And at one time, there was a problem to where Time Warner Cable had something wrong with the sound, where something wasn't plugged in properly. And he thought that was happening again. So he walked the lady through the process. And she said, "What is mute?" "Excuse me? My TV, it says mute. I'm pressing the volume up, but it still says mute." He said, "Do you see a mute button on your remote?" "Yep, press that." And so, her television was muted, but she still called Lee Perkins, the CEO of Cheshire TV, at home, or director, well, whatever his title is. He's the guy that oversees the day-to-day. He got called at home because somebody's television was muted. So if you wind up doing one of these things that they tell you not to do, that's very likely to happen in your little small town. If you live in a small town, if you live in a bigger city, they might not even wind up allowing people to submit content. But by law, they're supposed to have a process. Some community access stations are much more strict on what they allow. They have a review board that watches it, and if they don't like it, they don't put it on. In Keene, they will air anything that anybody submits. There was controversy several years ago to where around Halloween, someone filmed himself with a pumpkin. I will leave it at that. Let your mind go wherever it may, because that's what he was doing with the pumpkin. And it aired, and then people got outraged and went to the city council and demanded that the city council prevent that thing from happening again. And the city council said, "We have no control over the cable access television station. You need to go to talk to them." And so they went and talked to the community access people, and the guy that runs it is a very big free speech advocate. And he said, "Absolutely not. I will not tell people that they cannot submit things. I will not set up a review board. And if people mark it as mature content, I will air it between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., which is safe harbor hours. But otherwise, I will not do anything to discourage people from submitting content." So as long as you produce something that doesn't have rolling or tearing or volume going way up and way down, then a lot of community access television stations will submit it. You also need to have the little blurb at the front and the back saying that this was produced by an independent producer. The views are not necessarily those of the board of directors, blah, 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 blah. But you can either download that text for yourself and create what I call a donut, to where you've got at the beginning and the end and you plop your stuff in the middle. Or a lot of times you can pay them $10 and they'll do it for you. So whatever you feel like doing with that. And you can also wind up doing, again, YouTube is very popular for people to upload videos. There's also Vimeo, LiveLeak, and Blip, which are fairly popular. And I would suggest and this is just me making a suggestion, would suggest that if you're doing video, to only put up an edited product. There are rare occasions when you would want the raw product, such as this event here would be fine. And this event, I mean, this presentation, it's fine to put up the raw product for this. If you're going to, I don't know, a rally, then a lot of times raw video from that is good. But if you're just walking down the street, following a meter maid, and you've got 7 hours of you pointing your camera just randomly around and nothing is happening, I find that to be diluting of the actual quality that people put out. So I would suggest quality over quantity. But again, that's just my personal preference. I know that there are some people that love to watch the Freeman TV Raw channel, to where you see Garrett walking around plugging meters, and then there's a lot of sidewalk and his radio blaring 5 inches away from the video camera. There are at least a dozen people that watch those videos. I don't know who they are, but they exist. So I will now open it up to the floor. I think we've got about 10, 15 more minutes left. So if anybody has questions, there is a microphone up here. Or if you just want to shout from where you are, I can repeat the question so that the video picks that up. Okay. Okay, so the question is about using something like if this, then that, or RSS graffiti, or network blogs to share the blog from the website onto social media. So to answer the question, yes, it does wind up only putting a preview, but it puts a link to the blog post. And that is good for increasing traffic to that one particular thing, which then winds up moving that higher up in the Google Analytics or whatever other search engine you use, so that if somebody types in free Ross, then freeross.org is obviously going to be the top result. And then they might wind up having it of, the next major post, whatever has the most hits on that website. Or if it gets picked up by somebody else, then, that might wind up being up there as well. But yeah, so it does edit, it puts a preview, but more importantly, it puts the link back to the blog post. Yes. The question was, is there an advantage to using something where it puts on just more than Facebook? And yes, there is an advantage. And then it saves you time instead of having to go to Twitter and post the link and then go to here and post the link. And if you are posting links to multiple sources without using one of these if this then that or Hootsuite sort of things, I would recommend using Hootsuite. It's HOOTSUITE.com. The free service that they offer allows you to connect 5 social network sites to the Hootsuite. So, for instance, Free Talk Live has theirs connected to the Facebook page and the Google Plus, and then they're using something to drag it from one of those 2 sites and post on Twitter. Mine, I have it connected to my personal Facebook page, my fan page, my Twitter account, the fan page for FPP Radio, and the fan page for Free Press Publications. So it automatically shares on those. And you can, of course, set up Google Plus, Tumblr, and another myriad of networks that they give you as an option. You can pay for the service, and then instead of being limited to 5, I think you get 20, or you can go something else, and it gives you unlimited to where you can just post one link, and it puts it out to more social networking sites than I could even fathom to name. But yeah, I definitely see it as beneficial to share a link to as many places as possible because that gives people more options to then reshare. And the way Facebook has been acting lately, I think it's somewhere around 3% of the people that like your page are seeing your post. So the more people that see the post that click share, then the more people will then see the post that then increases the number of people that have been reached by the post that then has something to do with their algorithm that then allows more people to see your post. Any further questions? Yes. So that was a tip on using Twitter to repost the same thing at 1 hour intervals. That way, people from different time zones will see it because the way Twitter works, where it pushes things down the news feed. And some people do use Twitter as a news aggregator. Personally, the way I aggregate my news is I use Dig Reader. I used to use Google Reader, but Google got rid of that product. Dig Reader looks and feels very similar to how Google Reader looked and felt, and it allows you to import from various RSS feeds. And I use it to compile news for the daily newscasts that I do. I've got time for one more question if anyone has. And seeing no further questions, I do believe I still have a couple of copies left of the printed form of the presentation that I gave. If you would like one, come get it. I do ask that you make a donation of either Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Dogecoin. Or if you just want to hand me a piece of silver, I would take that as well. Thank you.